Slinger, take one. Also, I haven't done an interview about Shakespeare for ages, so this is quite fun. I think we start with your first experiences of Shakespeare, maybe? What were they, and how did they make you feel?
Well, in a way, I think I feel like my journey really started with poetry beforehand, because I had a sort of slightly odd, precocious, I suppose, relationship to poetry, because from the age of 3, my parents sent me and my other 3 siblings to a teacher in the area, local teacher, who taught sight reading and bits of elocution and and drama and stuff. And she was renowned in the village that we grew up as being a really inspirational teacher, and she would get kids reading ages up, like beyond where they should be. And my mum found out about her and was just like, this sounds good. So we all got sent to this woman, and she was an incredible, very charismatic woman who was passionately interested in performance and poetry. And so from the age of 3, I was exposed to poetry. I was learning poetry. I did my first public performance at the age of 3 at a drama festival in Blackburn that happened every year. And I did a poem called Argos the Puppy Dog. And then I did that festival every year until I left home when I was 18. So I had this sort of weird, very early exposure to poetry, and so a love of poetry, and I guess along with a love of it and an exposure to it, I had this sort of innate understanding of it in a way. So by the time I had my first exposure to Shakespeare, which would have been the first time that we looked at it at school, I guess. I can't remember whether I went and saw anything. Probably around the age of 11, probably when we started looking at it at school. I remember very vividly being in class and that thing of having to sort of read bits. And nobody else in that class was remotely interested, I don't think, in it at all. But I was, and I loved it. And I would put my hand up to speak it, And as I was speaking, I remember getting this pleasure out of saying those words. But I had a sort of a weird head start, And the curse, which I think is the way Shakespeare is taught in schools, I don't know whether it's changed since, but certainly back then, this incredibly dry, very sort of, from a sort of literary criticism angle, what are the themes in, blah, 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 is not one that's going to engender any sort of enthusiasm or passion or, it's just taught dreadfully in schools. And, but I'd already had the passion instilled in me, so I was very fortunate. Trying to think what the first... I was in a production of Julius Caesar at school, and I probably would have been 11 or 12, I think.
Possibly it has changed, because I know that the RSC are doing a lot of stuff at the moment where they're trying to use all of their resources as part of the education system, which is kind of really smart to a certain degree, because, who else to kind of share that information. But so anyway, going back to your first,
yeah, I can't remember what I played. I don't think I had a named part. I'm not even sure I had any lines. I think I was maybe just like crowd, Julius Caesar mob, renter mob people. But I was in love with a girl in the 6th form called Sarah Watson, and she played Portia. And that's the thing that I remember sort of mainly from, was my obsession with her.
The amount of actors that get into theatre.
I know.
Because
I know.
Who shared these stories because
I know.
She's like, yeah, maybe if I can do that.
I know. I was at an all-boys school, and which was a terrible place, really, for me, because I had 2 older sisters, very strong matriarchal household. I needed women, but there weren't girls in my school until the sixth form. But I had these weird friendships that I formed with, I was involved in the choir, and they were all in the choir, and so I'd get to know these girls. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, and then from there, my parents were avid theatre goers. Dad was president of Accrington Amateurs for 37 years or something. Not that they did any Shakespeare, that was sort of mainly musicals, but I mean, there was a theatrical sort of thing. But they used to take us to the Exchange in Manchester when the Exchange was the theatre outside of London and was as good as anything in London, but it was the powerhouse that was. And there was just the most extraordinary things going on there and just incredible productions. And I used to see Shakespeare productions there. I remember seeing Kenneth Cranham play Oberon. I remember seeing Derek Griffiths play Feste. I remember seeing Threlfall play Macbeth opposite Francis Barber.
Wow.
Yeah. In a production where they set it in a concentration camp. They were all shaved heads in these bunks, and it was all like this sort of mad power thing that was taking place in the barrack, like Auschwitz barracks. I mean, it was mind blowing. But the chemistry between Threlfall and Barber, I mean, you can imagine, was off the scale. And Threlfall was absolutely in his, he'd just done Nicholas Nickleby, was, Smike and all of that, and was the burning talent, And I just have this really strong memory of the end when the end of the play came and they all sort of looked towards those big doors, the Exchange, and the doors opened, this bright white light, and they were as if they were being herded back down into the chambers, into the gas chamber. I mean, it was so exhilarating,
Do you remember who directed that?
Do you know? I don't. I could easily find out. It would have been one of the triumvirate. It would have been Graham Murray, Caspar Reed, or the other one whose name I can't ever remember. Yeah. Greg Hersoff.
Oh yeah, okay.
It would have been one of those three, but I think Braham. I've got a feeling it was Braham.
So
experiences like, well, I don't know. I'm guessing mid-teens, because I think that was mid-80s maybe, or so maybe 14, 15, something around that sort of age. But yeah, I mean, I was exposed to that around that time, maybe a little bit later. Jacoby came to Manchester, touring, him playing Richard II and Richard III, sort of alternating them night by night. Mm-hmm. And I saw both of those and was just absolutely blown away by him. And then it became a sort of mad desire that I had, and madly then I actually got to do it with the histories and got to play, which was the most extraordinary dream come true. I mean, that was something that I had admired so strongly. I don't know whether I believe in manifestation, really. Maybe I do, but I mean that was, and the circumstances that sort of happened around, which I could tell you that story if you want to hear it, but around me getting that part.
Let's go for it, man. Yeah.
Well, so I'd done a year at the RSC. Greg had cast me as Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I did. I'd actually auditioned for Michael Boyd before for another production, but he wasn't that interested in me then for that job. I can't remember what it was for, but anyway, Greg met me for Puck. And I ended up playing Puck, and I did Comedy of Errors at the same time for Nancy Meckler. And as a result of that, Michael offered me Richard III for the histories that he was putting back together, remounting the histories, all 8, the following year. And I mean, I look back now and I just think, my God, I can't believe I nearly sort of threw this away. But I was in a relationship at the time, which was quite a serious relationship. I'd already had a year in Stratford doing the Midsummer Night's Dream Comedy Fairs. My girlfriend at the time was not happy about this idea of me doing 2.5 years and going out and being away, blah, blah. We had talked a little bit about maybe kids, and, so, and she was really not into the idea at all. And we talked, and I think I was a bit like, I've already spent a year at the RSC, and actually, do I want to spend any more time at the RSC? Anyway, I ended up deciding that I wasn't going to do it, which was just insane to think of now. But anyway, I felt like I couldn't, that was it. So I said to my agent, but I knew they were doing Richard II as well. And I had Jacobi in my head. And I said to my agent, go back to them and tell them that if they will let me do Richard II as well, I'll do it. So my agent told the casting director, and the casting director laughed down the phone at her. She just said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so just ask, Well, I'll ask, but it's not going to happen. I know. Anyway, we didn't hear anything back. So we completely assumed, well, she's asked and she's been ridiculed and, blah, blah, blah. It's gone. So we made the decision, I'm going to turn it down. I felt like I couldn't turn it down without explaining my reasons to Michael personally. I just thought that would be bad manners. So I set up a meeting with Michael. And I had the most excruciating 20 minutes with Michael, where he just sat there and tutted and sighed and sort of like, and then I'd give him my reason. Then he would undermine it. He just, yeah, but I had kids when I was opening, blah blah blah. He just kept on coming back with, and he made me, and then he'd just have these long silences where I just feel like, oh God. And eventually, after 20 minutes of this torture, he was just like, okay, he said, I can see you've made up your mind. If you change your mind in the next week, let me know. We were on our way out of the door, and I was literally seconds away from that being that, done and dusted, never being part of the histories, my life going in that direction. And I have no idea what made me say it, because I thought it was a done and dusted thing anyway. But as I was walking out the door, I said, who have you got playing Richard II? And he looked at me and he said, we don't know yet. We offered it to, it was Paul Rees actually, but I don't think it's going to work out. And he looked at me and he said, why would that swing it? And I went, yeah, that would swing it. And he was like, okay. He said, just give me a few days to think about it and I'll get back to you. And I walked out the door. A few days later, he was just like, okay, come in and let's have a chat about it. I came, went in and had a chat about it. We talked about it and then he offered it. But it's the maddest thing because, well, A, that casting director never asked him, clearly. She'd clearly just gone, that's never going to happen, so I hadn't even bothered. What made me ask him in that moment, given the fact that in my head I was absolutely sure that part was gone anyway. I've no idea. Something made me just open my mouth in that moment and ask the question, and my life went that way instead of that way.
That's the hustle, man.
That's the
hustle.
No, I know.
Not in a bad way.
No.
That's my need. That's what I need.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, and there are people of a more spiritual bent than me that would say that was the universe guiding whatever. I don't know. And maybe they're right. Who knows? But that journey started with me going to see Jacobi and doing those two parts. And seeing him, I don't know whether I saw it on a matinee in an evening or without, but I just was blown away by it. And then that was the sort of realization of that. I mean, it was just the most extraordinary sort of dream coming true, you know.
And in the playing of that and that tour, didn't it? It went.
No, we were at the Courtyard, and then we went to the Roundhouse.
Oh, so it didn't go. I
No.
don't know why I thought it
Didn't
toured
tour around.
after that.
We were supposed to go to New York.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Right.
There's
Okay.
a resentment that's
There's
still
a great tragedy.
yeah. There's a resentment I still harbour to this day. Yeah, we were absolutely supposed to go, and then the theatre that was going to take us turned around and said, we're not going to be ready for you, and so we had to find another place. We found another place, but they were looking for an extra 3 million on top or something. And at that point, only half of the season was up. That had amazing reviews, but they needed to know that the other half was going to be as good as that in order to sell it, and they sort of bottled it. Later, when it was the massive hit that it was, they were kicking themselves because they realised that actually, if they'd taken the risk, it would have paid off. But yeah, I mean, the whole company. If you speak to anybody from that company, there's just like, oh fuck, because they would have loved it over there. It would have been, you know, it's absolutely the thing that sort of. I mean, it was amazing, but it was also fodder for that particular American Anglophile sort of thing, you know. Anyway.
And that was after, wasn't it? The relationship with the Barbican had disappeared, wasn't it? Because that's why that was at the Roundhouse.
Yeah.
So it was just okay.
Yeah.
So what was it like working with Michael then? Because I met Michael a lot of times, and I just thought he was just an amazing man. Actually, something quite sort of just underplayed a lot of things. Like, there was a quality to him which was really kind of, which you mentioned earlier, but very sort of still. There was quite a lot of just inner monologue going on whenever I met him, but also really open as well. It's like it felt like a contradiction sometimes.
Well, it's a funny thing, isn't it? I think directors, as a breed, are quite awkward people. I think there's a sort of. I mean, they're all obviously fabulously intellectual on some levels, and there's possibly an element of autism that goes along with that, a sort of, and a control. They're sort of, you have to be a control freak in lots of ways. You also have to have a certain ADHD-ness about you, probably, in order to be able to keep all of the plates spinning, which you have to do as a director. I mean, so that engenders a certain sort of awkwardness, I find, with most directors I've ever worked with. Even the nice ones, when you get past that, you know. But Michael didn't have that. Michael wore whatever those particular personality quirks that, you know, he wore those very, very lightly. And actually, one of his great skills, and one of the things that I really prize in a director, is the ability to manage confidence, his own and everybody else's around him. And that's not an easy task when you've got a company full of enormously huge egos, but all different and all needing different things. And then you've got the creative team, and then you've got producers, and you've got to know how to manage all of those people whilst not allowing your own insecurities about the project and what you're doing to bubble up, you know. And Michael was an absolute supreme master at that. He just imbued you and everybody else with confidence, you know, because he was so calm and so sort of unflappable. There was an incredible authenticity about him. You never thought that he was compromising who he is as a person. He'd get the best out of everybody, but it wasn't about pandering to anybody. He was like this sort of beacon of decency and authenticity that you just wanted to emulate, be around. It was like, he was like, I guess, I mean, he was a father figure in many ways to a lot of people, but he was like your dream dad, you know, firm, you know, you knew who was in control, but incredibly, you respected him. He had the most, everybody had the most enormous respect for Michael. And he didn't do that through fear or intimidation, or quite the opposite. He was nobody's fool, nobody's pusher. I mean, you know, but gentle, and he loved actors. He loved actors, and he loved, you know, and he loved nothing more than being around actors. And you know, he wasn't, I don't know, he was a very, very, very rare individual in many ways.
Real loss, actually, because there weren't a lot of him around, and there aren't a lot of him actually.
No, there aren't.
And it sort of just seems unfair anyway, but unfair that people of that quality don't get to kind of be around to continue to share that kind of excitement, that knowledge, that understanding still.
Yeah, there is, you know, in a world where Trump lives on and Michael Boyd is no longer with us, you sort of go, well, there's clearly no justice. there's no, you know, nobody's keeping a score on these things. It's like it's random as hell, and cruel, and you know. So yeah, no, I mean he was a one-off in many ways, and I don't know whether you went to his memorial, were you?
No, I wasn't. No.
I mean, it was.
I mean, I never worked with him, but I interviewed him with and spent. He was very open in allowing us in and out of the RSC.
Yeah.
As you would sort of half hope, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. But
yeah,
I can imagine his memorial was incredible.
It was extraordinary. I mean, it really was like the outpouring of genuine sort of emotion. You know, 500 people in the lyric, just, and the positivity. You know, it sort of resonated with this desire for all of these people to celebrate that, you know. And Caroline, his wife, had done an amazing job. She wanted to put together a production, essentially, that he would have been really proud of. And she absolutely nailed it. I mean, every single person who got up and said something or did something or whatever was just pitched absolutely perfectly. And, you know, I mean, and I just bawled all day. I mean, I was inconsolable all day. Just, you know, yeah.
Do you have
special?
Do you have in your? I mean, what's your favourite production? Is there something that like still? I mean, obviously I think the thing with Shakespeare, like a lot of his work speaks to different times. We always hear that phrase, but I think it really does. Like when you're younger, you know, watching Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, and then sing Romeo and Juliet, and like that world speaks to an age very well, and it changes as you go through life. So I'm just wondering, right now, what speaks to you? Where do you think you are in that kind of like in that world of Shakespeare, where there are things you want to say through the plays that exist?
Do you mean? Yeah.
It's you as you as an actor right now.
Yeah.
And just the age we are as people. I'm not suggesting we're the same age, but like the age we are as people. Like, what work speaks to you in a way that?
Do you mean something I've seen, or something I've been in, or something I'd like to do,
or something you've maybe done and you want to do again, or something? I don't know. Is there something you did when you were younger and you go, oh, I should have? If I was 10 years older, I'd have actually really done a different job of that. Not necessarily been better or worse, just a different. So I wonder if there's something that really speaks to you now in a different way.
I mean, I've heard this, you know, from and I think most people who've played the part say similar things actually about Hamlet, which is that they feel dissatisfied in some way, that they didn't nail it, or that they feel like it wasn't sort of, and I sort of get that, but I think that's inevitable with something that's unscalable. You know, it's so rich, so huge. I spoke to Luke Fallon recently, who did it, and he was saying, you know, how this incredible feeling that he'd only really just scratched the surface. But of course, Luke, because of the way things are run that now at the RSC, he only had like a couple of months run at it, whereas I was doing it for an entire season. You know, so I had a bit more time at it. But even so, you know, you're chipping away at something that's so monumental. And yeah, I mean, I still have moments where I phoned David, the director, not that long ago, and was like, I know how to do that, you know, sort of thing now, right? You know, so I have these. I do get that sometimes with Hamlet. With the Scottish play, I have regrets because it's the one that I feel like I didn't properly, you know. It was the most elusive part I think I've ever played, of Shakespeare or otherwise.
Why do you think that is?
Interesting. Well, I've been thinking about that recently, and it suddenly occurred to me why possibly that is. And I think it's because I'm naturally drawn to, or find it easier to play, outsiders. So most of those big Shakespeare roles are outsiders. You think about Richard III, you think about Hamlet, you think about even Richard II, even though he's sort of like this thing, but he's actually lonely and out on his own and sort of. So I have an instant sort of in with those. Macbeth, at least at the beginning, is the golden boy. He is the man, the guy everybody wants to be. You know, he's the boy in the sixth form that the boys all want to be, the girls all want to have sex with. You know, he is the guy. Over the course of the play, of course, he sort of loses that and he becomes more of an outsider as the play goes on and as he goes sort of mad. But interestingly, as he descends into madness, I found that easier. By the end of the play, I had him. I knew how to. But the first half where I had to be the poster boy, that was really tricky. So I think it was for that reason. I think it was the outsider thing. I don't find it easy to play those confident, you know, head boy roles, you know, because I was never that.
That's what I was going to ask you, yeah, because quite often when you see the sort of the West End Hamlets, right, they're always the guys, the actors who probably were the head boy, the kind of,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And,
yeah.
Macbeth, you know, that thing of like, they always were that kind of, that character. They cast them by that, almost, to be honest with you. But then I feel, actually, interestingly, when I've seen that version of it, I feel like they struggle on the back end.
This is what Michael said to me. When we started rehearsals, he said, actors generally either find the first half easier or the second half easier. And he said he'd done the play before with Ian Glenn, and he said Ian Glenn found the first half easier and the second half not as easy. And I was absolutely the opposite. So, and Ian Glenn is, I mean, you know, you look at Ian Glenn and he looks like a head boy, you know, I mean, he has all of that, you know, sort of thing. So
how would you then approach that now?
Well,
like, thinking about that.
Yeah, interesting. I don't really know. I think probably I would start by not having that in my head. I'm not sure.
Good luck.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that thinking of it in terms of I'm the golden boy and then I'm not sure that that's helpful, basically.
No.
I think you need to be a bit more confident that whoever you are, and the descent will take care of itself if you just need to play it. Whereas I had this whole physical thing going on. It was all like, or the armor, and at one stage the idea was because the story of Macbeth is sort of the story of Lucifer, and it's being cast down out of heaven and all of that. At one stage I was thinking, well, let's go full on angel, and I was going to grow in fact I did. I grew my hair out because I had shaved head at that time, but I grew it out, and then I was going to do tight curled blonde ringlets, like Angel Gabriel style, and go full on the angel, blah blah blah. And I remember I had this, and I went and I got them. I got it dyed peroxide blonde. Got the girls and the wig and the makeup department to sort of tightly curl it for me. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, "You look absolutely ridiculous. There's just you don't look like a golden boy. You just look like, I don't know. You just
like an 80s kid.
Because it just didn't. So anyway, I shaved my hair. But then I thought, well, maybe if I just keep it peroxide but shave it, so have it close crop but have that very blonde sheen to it, which is what I ended up doing. But clearly my mind was on, right, we need to print Golden Boy at the top of the show. And I think if I was going to do it again, I'd remove that pressure from myself completely. Like, just print it, it's in the text, just don't worry about it. And I think that's what I do.
Yeah, because I guess he doesn't really know he's there, he just is that, right?
Well, exactly.
It doesn't, he's never known anything else.
Exactly. So it's silly. I mean,
No, but
I was over. Yeah, it was a way in, and I think, but in a way, it sort of made me self-conscious about it in a way that wasn't helpful. Then it was like,
actually, there's something interesting about that, though, because that opens up that other thing of like how, the text is there, how actors find a way into some of these characters, because like there's a million variants to how one does that, right? But everyone has their different, their way. Some people, they'll use music to find and try and tap into that, but we all have to find a way in, because yes, of course, everything is here on the page, but it has to come off the page.
Yeah.
So, how do you find your way into? I mean, we've spoken about Macbeth, but generally, like for you, what is your way into performing Shakespeare's text on stage? Do you know? Is it a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I have I mean, relating specifically to. I mean, there are the physical things which I do think about, how they look. Those don't necessarily. Sometimes I have an idea about that at the beginning, but sometimes they just come out of rehearsals. But in terms of approaching text, or Shakespeare in particular, I mean, the psychological stuff is the same for me, whether I'm doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or whether I'm doing Richard II. It's, working out who these people are, what's driving them, what are their driving things. And I will do quite a lot of research in trying to find out. I had some interesting stuff about Macbeth. The actual Macbeth was that his father was rather sort of ineffectual leader, and was not that well respected and sort of lost the crown and blah, blah. But his grandfather was this incredibly sort of martial, blah, blah. And so that gave me a way in. I was just like, well, so Macbeth's trying to rid himself of the reputation of his father, and he's looking towards this grandfather that he has in the past, and that's That's one of the things that's, sort of. So I have things like that which don't vary regardless of what production I'm doing. But then I do have some quite specific things. I have like a 4-point thing that I apply to Shakespeare, which is something that I teach actually when I have taught
Can you talk about
the
that?
occasional
Yeah,
masterclass.
yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So there's four points. The first is know your onions. Know your onions. It's a classic Shakespearean double meaning. I thought at one stage, know your onions might be a Shakespeare phrase, which it sounds like it should be, which would have made it a triple meaning, which would have been very satisfying. But actually, know your onions is 1920s, I think. Anyway, know your onions. C.T. Onions was Oxford English Dictionary editor back in the day, and he was maybe one of the first, probably not the first, but anyway, he did the sort of definitive thesaurus on Shakespeare, which I've still got. There may be other better versions these days, but anyway, it was the one that I always knew. Being absolutely rigorous about meaning and not letting yourself off the hook ever. Being rigorous down to every single word and checking and double checking every single word to make sure, A, that the meaning of the word in an Elizabethan time is very often not the same as the meaning of it now. So little things like realizing that favour, for example, was the Elizabethan word for face, or could be used. All of these little things that if you haven't absolutely nailed them on, there's just no way you're ever going to be understood. All of this stuff that people have about, I don't understand Shakespeare. A lot of that, I genuinely think, most of it is because the actor hasn't absolutely nailed on exactly what they're saying. They don't know really. They've got a gist, a wash, but they haven't. So that's the first. Know your onions. Make sure that everything and being aware that sentences can have double, sometimes triple meanings, and knowing each one of those so that you've got them all. Anyway, the second one is, which students always like, is fuck the rules. I'm going to qualify that a little bit because I don't mean completely, but certainly at the beginning, and certainly when you're teaching people Shakespeare, and certainly when you're teaching actors how to play Shakespeare at the beginnings of their journeys with Shakespeare, get rid of. Because if you teach Shakespeare from the rules first out, what you can get is actors. I know, and I'm sure you do, very good, very well respected actors, Shakespeare, but you can hear the verse, and it's one of the things that immediately makes me switch off. The minute I can hear somebody hitting the iambic or whatever, my brain just switches off completely, and it's because they're slavishly attached. They feel like if they don't let go of these rules and this structure, and that somehow they're not getting it right, or somehow that, and I think it's the wrong way round. There are things about the rules which are interesting to think of later, once you've got the meaning, once you've understood it. But first, make me understand what you're saying. That is your only job. In as contemporary a way as you can, make me understand it. What you'll find is, if you do that, a lot of those rules take care of themselves. The rhythm will have taken care of itself. He wrote in that form because it mirrored the way we speak. I'd really like to have a cup of tea is a classic iambic line, But nobody says, I'd really like to have a cup of tea. Nobody says it like that. You never hear it in normal speech, but it's in normal speech the whole time. Now, why make somebody so hyper aware of the meter that they have that thing in their heads where they've got to? Why do that? Just get them to work out what it means and to say it in a way that makes me understand it. Then later you can sort of go, well, isn't it interesting that there's an extra beat in that line, and what does that do to how does that make us feel? Or, notice that those two words are sort of rhyming here, and maybe just ping those out a bit. Brilliant. Bring in those things once you've got full understanding, and once you've got somebody saying it in a clear way that is going to make a contemporary audience understand it, then we can start to sort of bring in those points of interest. But I think it's done the wrong way around. And if you do it so rigorously at the rules, you get people who become sort of robotic. And so fuck the rules, that's the second one. Raise the stakes is the third. The one of the big things I think when I watch Shakespeare very often is that the stakes are nowhere near high enough. I think it's it's certainly true in drama per se. The stakes have to be. Most plays are written at a point of crisis or tension because that's what creates interesting drama. But with Shakespeare, it's always, we're at such a high pitch in these people's lives, in the lives of these people that are being portrayed. Very often they are literally statesmen, kings and queens, and the stakes are literally about countries, and they're about alliances and these huge hugely sort of important things. But even at the more domestic, they are people who are embroiled in the loves of their lives, the grieving of their lives, the battles, the wars, and we have to find that stake in the playing of it. It's not the easiest thing to do. What tends to happen is that people can start to overplay, and that sort of Shakespearean style, that has become a parody of itself, can start to creep in because people are attempting to recreate some sort of size. What's that quote? Who was it who said, a condition of complete simplicity costing not less than everything? Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, it's good.
In a really simple way, it's like, this is not a normal day.
Yeah.
Like, we don't think that what's happening in Hamlet is on any given normal day, or any of these plays. What's happening is not a normal day. That's why it's a play. It's a bigger endeavour.
Yeah.
So you have to hit those things, otherwise. Yeah. But there was that thing that I felt like even when I was a drama school, where it's like, let's try and really bring it down to what it's to the everydayness of it. It's like, it seems so bizarre to me even then, because it's not a normal day. It's like, as you say, you're dealing with kings or statesmen or countries or Trump or Starmer. That's what the stakes are in so many of these plays.
And part of that is, creating the world and the direction and making sure that people are, there's that whole cliche about you can't play status, it has to be given to you, And so you need a director who's very, very good at making sure that, Michael was an absolute master at it, making sure that that world is created where you have these central figures who are totemic, iconic sort of people, and everybody has this due reverence, and that is played, that is really inhabited by everybody on stage, so that things don't become sort of domestic in that way. So it does take. I one of the things that I do when I have done sort of masterclasses in order to is is I do like resistance sort of work with people, sort of getting them to say the text, but literally physically having people hold them back as they try to sort of reach something. You know, and those sorts of exercises are quite good because they can immediately create the tension required. And then once you've got them absolutely exhausted, then let them go and just get them to say the speech very simply then. And they contain, and then they can just be simple and just stay there. I mean, they're sort of breathing heavily, whatever, but it just gets people into that place where you're sort of like, that's where you need to be. That's where this speech exists, at that pitch, you know. So that's number 3. And 4, I think I used to have 5, but I can never remember the 5th one. But anyway, the 4th one is cast the audience, which was something that Russell Beale mentions in his book. But I swear to God, I've been thinking it for years. I didn't nick it off Simon. I did not nick it off Simon. It was, but it was the first time I've ever seen anybody put it in print before. I've never seen anybody put it in print. But when one of my real formative experiences as an actor, doing Shakespeare, was the first season of The Globe in '97, and nobody knew quite how it was going to work. You know, the theory was that we're going to recreate the atmosphere of Shakespeare in London, and that Globe and this sort of thing. But there was a lot of skepticism around. There were a lot of people, probably I was one of them actually, that thought it's going to be a bit cringy and you're just going to get American tourists shouting out "Gadzooks," and it'll just be like really sort of a bit, you know. And I remember the opening night of we did The Winter's Tale, and I was standing backstage listening. Mark Lewis Jones was playing Leontes, and in the scene where Paulina brings the baby that Hermione's just had in prison to Leontes, and she's like, "This is your child, what the fuck are you doing?" sort of thing. And he has these lines where he says, "Shall I let this bastard live to see and call me father? Better burn it now than curse it then. So be it, let it live," right? And I was stood backstage, and Mark turned out to the house, 1,500 people. And he went, and he spoke to the house. He said, "Shall I let this bastard live to see and call me father?" And 1,500 people went, "Yes." And he looked at them and he was a bit shocked. And he went, "Better burn it now than curse it then." And they all went, "No." And he looked at them and he went, "So be it, let it live." And the hairs on the back of my neck, I was just like, fuck. That he was writing, it was suddenly absolutely crystal clear to me that he wrote that audience interaction in mind. He absolutely had that written in to the text. And that any production which doesn't take that into account, at least, I mean, you're not going to get that in any other theatre other than the Globe, unfortunately, really, but at least you have to play it and be open to that, suddenly became really sort of clear to me. And ever since then, the relationship with the audience has always been vital to me. Sometimes it's as simple as that. This is happening in my life. What do you think I should do? In a soliloquy. Soliloquies are not people on their own ruminating. No. They are direct conversations with the audience. What should I do? What do you think I should do? Oh. So that it can be as simple as that, but it can get quite interesting when you start to cast the audience as certain people. Mm-hmm. So Richard III, for example, whose relationship with the audience is fantastic, from the minute he arrives until the end. it became clear to me as I was playing it that the audience is very much on his side at the beginning. They're sort of behind him going, go on, get him, you know, as he's going, this is what I'm going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And the audience is just like, yeah, this is going to be great, and he can feel that, and he's just like, yeah, you're with me, aren't you? This is we're going to have a brilliant time together. About halfway through, when he starts killing children stuff, it starts to change, and I started to feel, oh, you're not as sure, are you, anymore, you lot out there? And the audience are literally sitting there thinking, not sure we signed up for that, you know? And he can feel that, and he's like, well, fuck you. You know, you don't have to come with me if you don't want. But I'm going to do this, and it's, you know, and it gets darker. And then by the end, when he's having his breakdown before the battle, and he's looking out, and he has those lines where he's talking about, all I can see are people judging me, people, and the audience then becomes this panel of people just going, you are an evil sort of waste of space. Anyway, that's just an example of one where it's just like being specific about sometimes about who these audience people are and how they relate to you at various points during a play is really, really useful, and has really helped me to crystallize or clarify exactly, you know.
And there are so many different forms of theatre, and the way that we watch theatre can be so observational sometimes, but with Shakespeare, it always feels like we are very elemental to what's going on stage, and to admit that seems crazy. On that point, then, with all the kind of leading characters you've played, have you always felt that audience kind of journey with you, like as your character is falling from grace, or kind of, or rising from, you know, can you always feel that? Because I've never played one part like that all the way through, in the sense of like that scale, so I don't really understand. I can recognise it per se, but I can't totally imagine what that's like. So what does that feel like when you have the entire theatre kind of on that?
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why it's so satisfying to play, because the spontaneity of the character and what they're going through is written into the text, because all of those lines about the soliloquies where a character's going, this is happening, or, you know, what should I do? They are literally somebody trying to work it out in the moment. So it's an unbroken inner narrative that Shakespeare writes, on top of all the amazing poetry and the lyricism and, you know, all the other reasons why he's so amazing. He's written for you your inner monologue, your what's literally going on second by second by second, because you can see the characters working it out, and he's working it out with the audience. You know, help me out. What should I do? I mean, one of the most electrifying moments in Hamlet was oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I, doing that speech. And he has that thing, am I a coward? And there was a bunch of school kids up on the seats sort of above my head, who all just went, yeah, like that. Then of course the next line is, who calls me villain? Plucks my beard, plucks my pate across, or whatever it is. You know, so all of these next bits, which are all like, fuck you, which are unequivocally what he wrote. I mean, when you experience it, even if you haven't realised it, if you're a bit slow like me and you hadn't realised it beforehand, when it's that, and you suddenly go, oh God, well, of course that. I mean, what I'm trying to think of another playwright that's not of that period where you have that. You don't, you have that sort of dynamic.
Yeah. I don't know.
No. I mean,
No.
pantomime is the
Well,
closest.
yeah.
It's the closest that we have still existing, where that relationship and that sort of thing is, But yeah, I mean,
What's just thinking about productions that you've seen, and you mentioned a couple. Like, are there any that you haven't mentioned which kind of you found profoundly kind of, or just profound, I suppose, to you as an actor or an audience, or both?
Mark Rylance's Hamlet, his original in '89 or whatever it was, RSC. Yeah, was special.
What
Really
was
special.
It? Just because a lot of people won't have seen that.
He, it was very, unheroic, I suppose, or well, I guess. So I would have been 16, 17, and I don't know how much older than me Mark is, but maybe 10 years, is he? I don't know.
Probably. When were you born?
72.
Yeah, okay. Probably 10 years.
Yeah. So, but he was recognisably my age. I mean, not my age. He was 27. I was 70. But like, I recognised the image, in a way that maybe I hadn't quite been able to recognise I mean, I know David Warner had done that student-y Hamlet with the scarf back in the 60s, but I wasn't even born then. So, but it was the first time that I'd seen, somebody do it recognisably as someone of my age. And Mark, obviously, incredible talent, but was very, or I felt anyway then, he seemed to be very anti-Shakespearean, in his delivery, in his style. It was very modern, the way he delivered it. He delivered it in a way that I understood it, and and it was really moving and very startlingly modern. That was the thing that really sort of struck me about it.
Did you work with him at the Globe then?
Unfortunately not. So it was back then. They had two companies in the same season, and one did two plays, the other did two plays, and he was in the other company. So he did. That was the year he did Henry V.
I mean, there's so much you can really sort of like talk to about Shakespeare. One of the things that you said earlier, which I think is really interesting, is the thing of finding the truth. It makes me think of when I've seen Shakespeare productions where they go, this guy is important, we're going to put the biggest armour on him, set of armour on him, known to man, and that's going to tell you that he's important, or he has this kind of... Whereas I love it when we get this kind of juxtaposition of that, where it's like, well, he doesn't really have to wear armour till he fights. He's probably going to be wearing board shorts. Do you know what I mean? It's like that kind of... I love that, but I always feel when you go into a production, it's like, okay, he's got like... they've spent all this money on this armour. It's like you've immediately lost me, because I don't quite buy that. Actually,
you've just reminded me what my fifth point was.
Oh yeah, great.
In my plan, and that was look for the opposite, which is exactly what you're saying. Whatever you think the general tone of a character is, a moment in the play, blah 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 blah. At least explore the diametrically opposed idea. Yeah. Whether that's like you say, whether that's the costume, whether it's, this character is inherently evil, so we look for the good in him. We look for humour where it's, where we're in a moment of high tragedy or grief. Always look for the opposite, because Shakespeare is antithesis incarnate. That is one of his amazing skills, is that his stuff is riven with antithesis, to be or not to be. I mean, everything is, he will present an idea and then present you with the opposite, always, at all times. And I think by always being on the lookout for the opposite, I think we are honouring him and what he has intrinsically given you, you know. And I have always found that to be incredibly useful, and it sometimes you'll look for the opposite, and maybe you'll decide, well, it's a worthwhile exercise, but it's not actually helping us particularly. But the exercise itself will give you something, you know.
Well, because sometimes you come into a production and half of these decisions have already been made for you, right? And it's like, so we've got this is what you're wearing. It's like, I mean, not necessarily the RSC, but it's like, this is what you're wearing. It's like, oh, okay, well, I've got to kind of like stretch my brain into understanding why that's now what he's wearing, because that isn't where I thought I was going with this character. But it happens all the time, and I feel sometimes you can really see it in actors who've been given this sort of, it's like an anvil. Do you know what I mean? There's this one thing they've got to carry all through the play, which you can tell wasn't ever part of necessarily their understanding of that character, and it kills production.
I think I've been really lucky in my career that I've worked with some really beautifully collaborative directors and also sort of costume people who have either started the process by it being a conversation rather than a end product, or at least have been open to my ideas about something, and also been open to changing what they initially had if it's something that, because like you said, I mean, you just don't know on day one who can possibly say, you know, on I mean, obviously you have to have made some decisions. I mean, you know, you don't just start with a blank slate. But the idea that you can, you know, go through an entire rehearsal process and not come up with ideas that come out of that rehearsal process, which inform the way you think about it, is insane. It's insane. So yeah.
Is there anything you've seen recently that maybe nothing that's still around, but that you really enjoyed? You know.
I'm trying to think. Shakespeare.
I don't suppose you saw. I don't want to kind of necessarily mention it, but you didn't see Prasanna's 12.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah. I was wondering whether to talk about that, but yeah, I could talk about that. It's an interesting one to talk about in some ways, because did you see it in Stratford?
I did not, and I wish I had actually.
It worked better in Stratford, and
Yeah.
I think Prasanna would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
It's such an odd. I mean, everything we're talking about relating to an audience. You know, you go from what is now beautifully set up for that in Stratford, and the thrust stage in the main theatre now, and you try to do the same thing on what is probably the coldest proscenium, you know, in the city. You know, that just where really it only really repays cinematic sort of imagery, really, that space. I mean, and they've all obviously been directed, you know, take things out as much as you can, and so you've got all these great actors, you know, desperately trying to contact you in the Barbican, but with all the will in the world, you know, it's just so much harder. So I sort of felt for them all, and I did think it worked better in Stratford.
It's interesting not having seen it in Stratford. I could tell why it would work better there for sure, and for all the things that you said as well. But what I really enjoyed actually about it was Michael Grady Hall's.
Yeah.
I like Sam West. And I'm like, the energy these guys were putting into their performances were just absolutely beautiful. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from anyone else. I just mean that for me, they were just you could see the work they were doing.
Yeah. No, definitely Michael and Sam. I thought, you know, we're.
And I can imagine the clown at the end would have just had that. In Stratford would have had I don't know. There was a different sort of negative space in the Barbican, which was they tried to create by sending him to the back, but like or deeper, downstage, backstage, but downstage. but he was sort of too lost in that kind of.
Yeah, and of course, like in that thrust thing, you take people backwards, bring them forward, and suddenly it's like you're watching something that is literally, practically three-dimensional. Because it's people are coming in and out, and I mean,
It's like when I saw Benedict Cumberbatch do Hamlet there as
Right.
well. Did you see that one?
I didn't know.
And again, it was like, I think it was Lindsay Turner, I think.
Was it?
Yeah, and they created this amazing use of that sort of stage, but it was too big still. You're still kind of like, you're having to kind of, you're literally watching tennis.
Yeah.
And in all of the time you're kind of scanning the stage and following the actors, you're missing just so much nuance. It's sort of, it's a really tough space that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is. I've never actually. Have you worked at? Have you? No, I've never.
I actually remember standing on the stage when I auditioned for Guildhall about 1990 or something ridiculous or something, and being like, "Oh Jesus, this is like, what is this? What is this?"
Yeah.
Doing something from I don't even know what it was now, but yeah, no. Anything else? What? I mean, I haven't been thinking tabs. What have I missed? What do we want to talk about? Is there anything else? Something I found really interesting. I remember speaking to Peter Hall, and he was saying the one thing he regretted was the rules that he put in place in so far as how to understand Shakespeare.
Really?
Yes. And
That's interesting.
And he said one of the reasons they did it is because they had loads of younger actors coming into the RSC who didn't really have that much Shakespeare experience, working with actors who did. And he was like, we really had to find a way to bypass this lack of experience quickly to help them find a path with the other actors who had a lot more experience. And he said, but I feel like God, this is a long time ago he said this now, but it was on camera, and he was like, I just feel like we created a lot of confusion for people that possibly we should never have done.
That's interesting. When did he give that interview?
2008, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
And when had he made that realisation that it was a mistake?
It just been he didn't even say it like
recently to that interview.
Yeah, it was kind of it wasn't really a sort
interesting.
It wasn't really a. It was a strange part of the interview, and we might have just been at the end of the interview, and we were just chatting about something, and it wasn't a pivotal thing in the interview. It just sort of came out. It was like a musing of just like, oh yeah, I just wish.
That's so interesting because he's like, when you think about rules-based teaching of Shakespeare, I mean, he is the name that comes up as being the purist, the guy. So that's really interesting that he sort of had that later on. He came to see Macbeth, and he was really, really nice about to me afterwards. And I remember thinking, I mean, obviously I was, really flattered, whatever, but I remember thinking, that's really interesting because I wouldn't have thought that he would like what I do because I'm not, strictly sort of rules-based. So maybe he'd already been thinking, I don't know, maybe he'd already sort of been heading away from that in his head, in terms of...
Well, it struck me from his interview that his thing was, do I believe it? Is it real?
Yeah.
Kind of. That's it. But the rules were there to help, not to hinder.
Yeah.
But they got all caught up in this, the way, in bad teaching at school. Do you know what I mean? Some teacher who went to see and read something, this is how we're going to help these kids who are 14 or 13 or whatever, deal with the Scottish play, or I don't know. And one of the other things I really thought was hilarious when we interviewed Mark Rylance, like he said, we're talking about how is there anything that you can't do with Shakespeare? Just don't set it in space. which sort of tickled me. And I was like, has it been something that's do you know what I mean? It's like the only thing it can deal with everything, but don't set it in space. Like, just don't. And the thing is, it probably could deal with it.
I was going to say,
It,
I'm pretty sure there's probably a play. If you did it tastefully enough, and you'd really thought about it. Yeah, I'm sure it could
Patrick
work.
Stewart in like Star Trek. And they probably even did one of those weird Star Treks, where everyone's out of the head on pink juice or something. Where they like, they did one with moonlighting, so I'm sure we did one with Star Trek.
Shatner was interestingly enough, he was a real Shakespearean, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Shatner,
He was. So, any advice? Sounds like you had good advice anyway, but any advice you would give to your younger self with regards to Shakespeare and being an actor with Shakespeare, and perhaps even if it's not being an actor, people who are scared of Shakespeare or think that it's not for them or it's not relevant or what can we do to bypass the kind of stuff that gets in the way of it?
Well, fuck the rules for a start. Stop. Don't wind yourself up with lots of fascinating but ultimately sort of rather cerebral things about trochaic rhythms and caesuras and and all of that stuff. Don't even go there. Really do your homework about what something means, so you know exactly what it means, and then emotionally find a way to emotionally connect with it. I mean, this is the thing that nobody teaches you at school. Nobody says this play, this jealousy that this person's feeling, because that's you know what that's like. You know what it's like to feel jealousy. You know what it's like. You teenagers, you know what it's like to be in love with somebody. Really find their emotional connection to something, because it's all that's what Shakespeare is. That's what Shakespeare is about. He wasn't thinking about rule. He wasn't sitting there going, I mean, he probably was. There was probably part of his brain that had an eye on just keeping, but he wasn't. It was about putting emotion and real human passions and on page and writing them more lyrically and more beautifully than anybody ever has, and getting that, nailing that, so but you sort of we need people to inspire us to do that, and people in schools aren't really doing that. I mean hopefully, I don't know if that's changing. It's a long time since I was at school. It's 40 years. But
it's complicated because it's like we put it into in my school, it was under the English literature banner, right? And it's not literature, really. Like it's not to be read. Whereas
that's interesting.
A lot of the other plays we were reading, right?
Yeah.
But these were plays.
Yeah.
And it's tricky to have it under drama because not everyone does drama, but maybe that's part of the problem. It's how it's how it's slotted into this kind of structure. Yeah,
no, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. The difference between plays. And interestingly enough, we had a teacher at my school who used to argue that plays were meant to be read, not performed. So we were on hiding to nothing, right from the start. He didn't actually believe that plays should be put on. He just believed that they should be read.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you're fighting that sort of academic dryness, it's really difficult. But I think the onus is on theatre itself to make Shakespeare as vital and as accessible, but as exciting as possible. But a lot of that is about being I can't stress enough the rigor that a company needs to go through to make sure that actors are absolutely 100% in charge of everything they're saying, and that they are conveying what Shakespeare was writing in all of its complexities and all of its hidden meanings and double meanings and triple meanings, and yeah, I have a theory which is backed up with zero evidence whatsoever, but it amuses me as a theory. So, which is that what we've gained in our ability to communicate at ever greater speeds over huge distances, the fact that we can literally pick up the phone, send an email, video call somebody halfway around the world like that, and the enormous advances that we've made in that, the speed of communication. We have lost, diametrically opposed, our ability to communicate one-to-one very complicated ideas. So our ability to be able to unpick and convey very, very dense, complex ideas to each other, we've lost that at exactly the same speed and at exactly the same amount. And that people in Shakespeare's day had that. Their ability to understand and convey at speed very complicated ideas greatly supersedes ours. And maybe not just the intellectual cognoscenti either, but maybe your average man on the street had much more ability to sort of... So our job as actors is first of all to unpick Shakespeare's text and make sure that we understand all of those ideas that are being expressed in all of their rich detail. And then once we've learnt it and we know what all of those meanings are, the next job is to be able to put them all back and convey them at the speed that I'm talking to you now. Well, now what happens with us as modern actors is that the process of trying to understand or trying to contain in our heads at any particular moment all of those ideas, because our brains just aren't used to that. Our muscles are just not used to that anymore. Our brains haven't changed. We still have that ability, but we don't use those muscles in the same way. Everything sort of slows down. So there's a period in rehearsals where you're sort of wading through treacle, just being able to think of each of those thoughts and say them and make, yes, okay, I've got that in my head, now I'm going to say this. The whole thing slows down. But then the process speeds up as you repeat it, and as you repeat the thoughts in your head, as you learn to think, then you can put it back together and do it at speed. But the initial process is the thing that I think people skim over, which is the rigor of the detail and being absolutely forensic about every single moment and making sure that you've got that mapped out. Because I think people just sort of go, well, no, I get it. Yeah. You know, you get that a lot. You know, do you know what this means? And you go, yeah, I think, you know. But then when you really start to question people, it very quickly falls apart. They'll very quickly make a mistake. They'll assume this word means something completely different. They won't have got the fact that that has a double meaning in it here, and you need to be aware of that, and blah, blah, blah. Once you really start to question people, most people just sort of end up sort of going, oh, actually, maybe I thought I knew, but actually...
And this is one of those things that's even more important for auditions for drama school, let's say. Because, like, I mean, I haven't sat in auditions for maybe, like, 6 or 7 years, but there was a point where I was sitting in auditions and sitting on panels, and I remember I had an amazing drama teacher from Cambridge, who was the mother of one of my best mates. She ran all the drama stuff in Cambridge, and I met her when I was like 16, and so she prepared me for my drama school audition. So she was rigorous, absolutely rigorous, and I remember going and auditioning and knowing everything, not knowing everything, but like really understanding what I was there for and what the character was there for and what was happening. Of course, I wasn't ever going to be 100% getting it right. That's just what it is. But then, years after I left drama school, going and seeing younger people auditioning, like the amount of lack of knowledge about what they were actually saying I thought was just insane. Like, I'm not being like negative to them. Just feel it's quite a lot of the time it's not having had good teachers, not really knowing what you're supposed to do to audition for drama school. Maybe not having had the experience before that either, but it seemed strange to me that you would say something without knowing what it meant. But that seemed to be so common. And they were really open to it. Oh, I don't really understand what that means. It's like, wow, like you probably should have done it.
Yeah.
You could just look that word up online now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the resources. And then I heard something the other day which I thought was really unsettling, and it was like the future, they reckon like 20 years now, judging from how we're proceeding through our learning now, is we won't retain any information. Everything will be online. We won't need to. And that's where we have this crazy like problems in society with like people like Trump or these crazy dictators, because no one actually has any reference points to anything that's of any use anymore. And they can change those reference points in moments, you know. And I thought that was kind of, those two things together almost somehow sit in this thing of just like we've stopped seeking understanding or stopped trying to learn things. We just want it to be sort of here, which seems to come back to what you're talking about, that thing of not really knowing not really knowing why you're there.
Somebody said something to me the other day which I thought was great about Shakespeare. She said that it was comforting to know that there are so many times in life where you feel like you don't have the words, and that it's comforting to know that somebody did, you know, which I thought was really, really nice. It's like, if you feel like you don't have the words for something, then go to him, because he will have somewhere, you know, and you can find them. And I thought that was really, really nice.